I'm nervous.
Okay, the camera is rolling, and you're live as of right now.
Okay, my name is Mike Wendell, and we are at the Steeple Building. It is August 18th, 2:15 p.m. on a Monday, 2003. And I have Mrs. Olivia Hultgren here, and if you could start by spelling your name and your year of birth.
My name is spelled Olivia. Then Belinda, Phylinda. Then Christine, Chrisstine. Then Johnsson. Then Hultgren.
Okay, and
The birth is October 4th, 1912.
and where were you born?
I was born at the home of my uncle Herbert Falk and his wife and son.
What would you say were your earliest memories of when you're, go way back to your earliest memories of growing up? First thing you remember, what would you say?
The first thing I remember, I suppose I was about probably maybe 3. My brother was a year older. And I remember 2 horses that broke away a block up towards the county church. We lived 1 block east of the county church, kind of on a corner, and the horses come racing down with a pole between them, just a pole, whatever you call it. And I thought they would go straight towards the cemetery road on down. And I thought maybe they would turn towards us. I got frightened because I was on the sidewalk. But they just went cat-a-cornered and stopped in front of the Bergman's big bay window. That's my earliest recollection of when I was little, because it always stayed with me.
Hey, do you know, find out whose those were?
Never did. Never did know. It was from a wagon or something a block away.
What would you say would be some early memories of things, say, whether it's, you know, school or anything like that, early memories of when you're younger, that sort of, you stick out that you remember?
Well, I remember when I started 1st grade, we lived on the corner across from Mary and Louie lived, so I just crossed the street for 8 years. Across the street there.
And how was life growing up there?
Oh, it was great. We played. We always went outdoors for recess and had fun. Most of the time, our very tall, slim teacher came with us. He was Paul Mertengren, and he played ball with the boys, and if the boys played soccer, most of us girls, older girls, played soccer. If they played, we didn't always play ball because they played hardball. But we would try to do the other athletics that they did. We'd have our games at recess. Paul was very active, always came out for recess with us, I know.
This is right there on the property, right?
In the old county school building.
Okay.
There was a fence, a kind of a gray fence, west end of it, and I know we girls would perch on the west fence down there in the corner kind of where it was shade trees, and we'd always watch the ball games. Because Paul always pitched, it seemed like. Teacher pitched to the boys.
Now, how many kids were in your class, would you say?
We must have been 6, 7 girls, and maybe 3 boys in my class.
Do you carry through that size grade throughout school, pretty much? Or did the class get larger or smaller?
No. I'm trying to think when I began 1st grade. Maybe, no, I believe most of them were, I think we kind of came right all the way through.
Wow. Let's see. What's the highest grade of school that you went to? Would you say? Was
My
it?
education,
Mm-hmm.
Galva High School,
Mhm.
senior, I graduated
Mm-hmm. What year was that?
1930.
1930. Is that building still there today?
My school,
Yeah.
it burned
Oh,
when
it
my
did?
son was 5. It would have been about 1945, wasn't it, I think?
Really? Wow.
It burned.
So it isn't the current school that the grade school's in now, then it was a different one, okay. In my notes here, what color was your hair as a girl?
My hair,
Yeah.
it was brown, I'd say medium brown,
Mhm.
not light and not dark.
Mhm. Would you say you were big for your size in terms of, height? Were you a
No,
big kid or
I
just
was almost, I was tiny.
Mhm.
I mean, I was probably almost the shortest one, I think, in my freshman class in high school.
Oh, is that right? And what they use for heat for the school? How'd they heat that anyway?
Well, I think we had a furnace in the basement.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I don't know now, I
Yeah.
suppose. Well, we did, was no custodian there, I imagine
Mhm.
Paul kept it going.
Uh-huh. Let's see. In terms of who did you marry, and what relation are you to the original colonists?
I married Raymond Hultgren, and my grandfather on Dad's side was John Peter Johnson.
Okay. How many children and grandchildren would you say you have now? I'm sure it's growing all the time.
I have 4 grandchildren.
Okay. Do you have a best friend in grade school? Someone?
Never been to school.
Yeah, someone that comes to mind that you remember? You're real close to?
I imagine it was Linnea Erickson,
Mhm.
on whose, that's the farm where,
And she lived here too? Or?
pardon?
She lived here too in Bishop Hill, or just outside of Bishop?
No, that Linnea lived where Mr. Meyer lives.
Oh, okay.
That was their place.
Uh-huh.
Good, yeah. Yeah, we went to grade school, but she didn't finish high school.
Mhm. So what type of things did you guys like to do when you were kids in terms of games and activities and things? You touched on that a little bit.
Well, so I had 5 brothers, and usually I was more, if they were out playing their baseball, or if they go to the timber and ski, and they'd skate on the creek,
Mhm.
or they'd have they had kind of makeshift toboggans, and
Oh, wow. Neat.
my brother Chuck made wooden skis for him, I remember.
Uh-huh.
And there would be a drop off, I know, going down the hill to the creek was must have been about, oh my goodness, over maybe a yard and a half high.
Wow.
We could drop.
Is that right? Yeah.
We didn't all do that, some would miss it.
Uh-huh.
You had to be brave to do it.
Yeah.
Take the sleds down, not the skis, they just
Uh-huh.
took the sleds down.
So you guys went down to the Edwards River there? And went down and did things there?
Towards that,
Towards that way?
we
Okay.
went to the timber that was just at the end of the street, the last street in town, in the northwest part of town.
Do you recall anything in terms of any kind of mill that existed around here?
A mill,
Yeah.
I don't recall. I just know that there was one down at the base of the town there.
Okay.
I was heard about it, but I never saw it.
Do you ever have any special events in Bishop Hill that you recall?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes, I remember what would be the first one that impressed me. When the First World War ended, they hung the Kaiser up there by the post office on the corner, across from the steeple.
Oh, really?
They had a kind of a, somebody made
Like an effigy?
effigy, that's
Yeah.
it. They made an effigy and they hung the Kaiser.
Is that right?
I remember when they robbed the bank here on the corner.
Is that right? Can you
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about that? What you remember from that?
Well, I was told, we heard it,
Mm-hmm.
but I was told that they came to town and some of the lights came on in the homecoming. And I remember I think it was a Lewis Johnson, very elderly man, lived in the second house from the corner, south, and he opened the window and they noticed it and they yelled to him to shut the window and get in or they'd blow his head off.
Oh, boy.
And then, of course, we heard the explosion, and the next morning we got to go up and see it. Was terrible.
Oh, really? And that was, where was that at?
At the very corner of the steeple right here. The bank was right in the corner of the steeple.
Wow. Was there a lot of destruction then?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Boy, did they get away with anything? Or?
They might have got some. I don't think it was too much of a haul, I don't think.
Wow, so I guess there was a sheriff at the time, or somebody that must have come and investigated, I suppose.
Oh, yes. There was a sheriff way before that.
Wow.
My Grandpa Johnson was sheriff in Henry County for a while.
Wow.
I don't know how long.
Yeah. Wow. What about electricity, or even before that a little bit? How was life before electricity, and how did that change things around here, whether it be out in the country or whether it was Bishop Hill? Or maybe it didn't change much of anything.
I don't think I believe, I can't remember having to have kerosene lamps. I can't remember having kerosene lamps. When I was young, but maybe there were.
Yeah. What was the method of transportation, would you say, when you were a kid mostly? You mentioned horses earlier, but what was the most method of transportation?
What?
Whether it
we
be...
had horses and buggies and horses and wagons and sleighs, and they had a farm wagon, I don't know what you call it. It was real low, and I know they put many people in it. They'd have the robes, the fur robes, you know, horse hide robes and things. And
like a sled of some sort?
Yes, or a sled, yes. Bobsleds they were called.
Okay.
Bobsleds. Oh, yeah.
How many horses would pull one of those?
Two.
Two? Wow.
I remember at Christmas we went out to Grandpa Falk's for Christmas, and I remember it was loaded, and there was so much snow that we were riding on top of the fences. It was all you and me.
Wow.
That was fun.
Boy.
But I remember the first time I saw a car come to town.
Yeah, well, what was that like?
Well, we were living at Marion and Louis' house then on the corner, so I must have been quite young. See, we moved there probably before I was in first grade. So it came to town, and I think it was owned by a farmer that lived pretty close to Grandpa Falk's on the road to Red Oak.
Really? I imagine probably something like that wasn't cheap to have a car.
No, it wasn't too much of a car. I mean, it didn't look so different than cars nowadays.
Wow.
But I can't remember the first car that came to town from one of the businessmen probably here. I don't recall who that was. But.
Boy. So when did it start looking like cars were in and horses were out? Do you remember how long the horses and buggies stayed around Bishop Hill?
I don't hardly think it was very many years, but there was always some farmers that liked their horses they didn't buy cars very quickly.
Wow. Do you ever been in the Yorkland Hotel and gone to anything over there that they might have had over there, or at the Woodman Hall? Or?
Yorkland Hotel, I was too young to ever get to go up to where they had the stage and that. Stage up those stairs and that I never went up there. But I remember the people that owned it, the Trollings, he was a wet repairman, and we were good. All those older people were kind to us kids as we were going back and forth. We visited with them.
Do you remember any stories that your mom or dad may have told you when you were younger about the early days in the colony?
Well, I know about the steeple. I know about the hotel. They probably already have that in history, but I was always told that, Douglas spent the night there before he debated.
Stephen Douglas?
Before he debated Lincoln.
Is that right?
In Galesburg.
Oh, wow.
That's already in the history, I bet you.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And then, of course, the Woodman Hall. Oh, yes. Oh, there was lots of activities there. Absolutely. In fact, it was the only place in town, I believe, where there was any social like that.
What did they do there? They have.
Well, well, first I knew they had the Modern Woodmans. They had the Fidelity Lodge. They had the Royal Neighbors a little bit later. They had oyster stews there. Well, they had programs. Oh, programs. And they used to put a large tent between the sidewalk that goes by the park there and the Woodman building. They call it the Woodman Lodge, really. And Chautauqua would come to town with their tents and their plays and their music and put a huge tent there. They did that quite often in the summer. They came to town.
That's something.
And we had school programs, and lots of the different people had, like I remember north of town, they had quite a group of young people who presented plays there.
Really? Wow.
About once a year they'd have a good play.
Boy. That's
I
something.
don't know what else we had.
Boy.
We had lots of fun, I know. Oh, of course, there was dances. Of course, Tweety's dancing. Oh,
They
yes.
had bands and everything there?
Pardon?
Did they have bands there?
Well, they had bands, yes. But that was usually people, local people, or they picked some from maybe, add to the band from neighboring towns.
Wow. Boy, that's
Oh, it was lots of fun. They played band was on the stage.
really.
They eventually had basketball games there, and you sat on the back of the chairs with your feet on the chair seat.
Do you recall, you had mentioned earlier about the big brick, and could you touch on exactly what you remember of the big brick and what happened to the big brick and all that?
Well, I remember visiting many of the people that lived there. And I remember people that I visited, well, both on the ground level, and then some of them had 2 stories, going up both sides of the steps. Some of them then went up 2 stories, but some only had 1 story.
Could you describe what it looked like? Did it look somewhat like walking down the halls of the steeple building, or did it look, what was the kind of look?
Walking down the halls of the steeple?
Did it sort of look, or did it have a different look to it, or?
Well, when you went in the door, it was just, well, I suppose it was the hall kind of across, but then the doors went to different rooms, just like they do nowadays. Your kitchen, your living rooms, your bedrooms. It was the same, only it was on that one. You just entered. I think they had some would live on one side of the hall and some on the other.
Oh, okay.
Some were quite older people who only maybe one person lived on one side.
Where did they eat?
They always ate on the level of well, yeah, the very level. Downwards was lower. That was all filled in when they had the baseball diamond, I suppose. But and the dining room was down there. That's where they always ate.
They have one table, a number of tables?
No, I don't remember that. But I know that everybody was fed there, so I didn't have many tables.
Wow.
Everybody was fed there.
Must have been a pretty busy place.
Well, it was, I guess, at that time.
I bet. And then who would have done the serving? And did the women do all that? Or
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The women did the serving, cooking and the serving.
What would is there such a thing as a typical meal in the Big Brick? Or was it different all the time?
Well, no, that I cannot say because I never ever heard anybody tell me what they ate because I was too young for that.
So, how many stories were there in the Big Brick?
Oh dear, I don't know. I don't know how many stories there was. You probably have to look at the picture before it burned.
And then, since you're mentioning it burned, what can you tell me about that? About when it burned?
All I ever know is that it started in, I believe, the very north apartment. That was where the Mrs. Gabrielson lived with her daughter Mabel, who was an English teacher in Orient most of the time that I ever knew. It started, supposed to start in their apartment and then worked its way to Nevals, who lived in the very south end.
And do you recall about how many people might have been living there at the time?
How many? Let's see.
If you had to take a guess.
There was 3 Nevals, and there was the Spetz family. Oh dear, Spetzes must have been 3 sons. And I believe, oh no, they had 4 sons, 4 or 5 sons. Then, oh dear, let me see. There must have been 15 at least people who lived there. Well, maybe more, counting some of those in the lower, where there was a bigger families down there. It had to be close to maybe 20 people.
Wow. Did they try to do something about this fire? Did they try to put it out, or was it too big of a fire?
No, they had, people came in, maybe they had some fire equipment. I think they called in other towns. Yes.
What time of year was this, would you say?
It seems to me it was February.
Cold out?
It was cold, but I don't think it was snow.
Yeah.
But it was cold.
Were they able to get things out of there to try to save
I would think they got almost everything out, I would think, on the lower floors, but not the 3rd floor.
And nobody got killed or anything?
No.
Okay, that's good.
No.
Wow. And
It was quite a catastrophe, I know.
And you were pretty close to it, it sounded like you were mentioning a little earlier.
Oh, yes, yes.
You were actually pretty close. And what did it look like as this was on fire? It was at night, was it, or was it?
It was 2 o'clock, about 2 o'clock at night, I believe.
Really? Wow.
2 o'clock in the morning.
And how could you describe what it looked like, this big building on fire?
Well, it was, yeah, it was a huge fire, but being brick though, it wasn't, you didn't see as much flame as you would have had it been a wooden building, I think. But there was a lot going up into the sky. I can remember that. The sky, it was just full of fire and embers, I guess it is. But there wasn't really embers, but whatever it was going across the park. Just the full seemed like it, and it was all going southeast, yes, across the park. That's where the wind took it that night, southeast across the park.
Didn't catch anything else on fire?
No, it didn't.
Okay.
That I could remember.
Yeah.
It was quite a ways then to get over towards the post office.
Sure.
But it might not have been too much wind.
Yeah. Wow. That's something. Can you tell me anything about other transportation, say the railroads, and how how that might have changed things, if it did change anything in Bishopville. Can you recall anything about the railroads, or?
Well, I remember of course, the depot. I remember that, Rock Island Depot.
And where was that at?
It was going east past the steeple now, straight on out east, and I can't say how far the depot was. It wasn't too far.
You ever go there and travel anywhere from the depot? Anyplace?
Well, when I was older, I went to Oregon to work, and I would take the Rock Island train back and forth. Sometimes I found somebody took me in a car, but I would come back and forth on the Rock Island train many times. And then I would come back to town because the dray always met for mail and things, and I could always ride up with most of the men I knew, you know.
Was there always a person over at the depot? Or
yes, they had a depot agent.
Oh, they did?
They had an agent.
Wow. Interesting.
It seemed like all the ones I remembered were just kind of young men from other towns. I don't remember a Bishopville agent from Bishopville. The draymen, of course, were.
Yeah. What did these engines look like? Was this?
It was the old locomotive type.
A locomotive, like a steam locomotive?
Yes, steam locomotive.
Wow. And were they long trains, or were they just?
They were not too long, no. No, they were not too long at all.
And then where would it have left from here? Well, it could have gone.
I think it went from Rock Island to Peoria, I believe.
Really? Yeah.
I know if people had wanted to go to Galva, it seemed like so many of them went in for, well, they go to dentists, maybe eye doctors and that. And they would take the train up, I know.
Could you get order things through the railroad, like have it shipped through the railroad?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's neat. Let's see. And then there was there any other transportation like that was in this area that you can recall? Like the railroad? Do you have anything similar to that?
The only thing I know that was when they began taking pupils to school in Galvin and to high school. They would kind of make a bus out of a truck, put a cover over the top, and they would take us there.
One thing I didn't touch on was you were mentioning the 1855, the Red House, the Falks House.
Yes.
Could you tell me a little bit about that, since that's the house that we live in currently?
Well, I was really liked that really well, because I loved that porch. The west porch, it was so different. It seemed to be a little bit decorated. It had benches on each side as you entered. There was a little bit of a trim there, and I loved that porch. But the other parts of the house were just like any other house, except the kitchen was huge.
Yeah.
Huge kitchen, because they had 12 children, and there was still plenty of room. The table was large, long. There was still room for big cupboards, and as they were heading to the bedrooms downstairs, yes.
Wow.
Huge.
And what color was the house when?
It was always reddish.
Oh, really? Well, okay.
Always
Good.
remember a pretty dark red house. White trim, I think. And then, of course, most of the people had a summer kitchen, what they called then, a smaller building that they used in the summertime.
Boy.
And basements and.
Oh, you had a basement in that?
Oh, they had a basement, yes. Oh, absolutely.